Hey everyone, welcome to our end of year show. We have the top shows, the top stories of the year, the what was hot, what was not. I'm very excited for our discussion today with our team from the New Stack, Joab Jackson, managing editor. Hello, Joab.
So what's up?
So yeah, well, what's up? That's going to be the big question today. And Libby Clark. Hello, Libby. Our,
Hey, Alex. Hey, Joab.
Our editorial director and marketing champ. Sup. Stephen Vaughan-Nichols in the house. Hello, Stephen.
Hello.
And Jennifer Riggins.
Hello.
Looking good, Jennifer. And Stephen, looking good as usual. Both of our correspondents here. And last but not least, Bruce Gain.
Hey.
Bruce is calling in from or getting a video link here from France. Jennifer's in London.
Yeah.
Stephen's in North Carolina. Joab's in New York, I believe, in Brooklyn. Libby and I are in Portland. So hello, everyone out there. All you New Stack friends of ours. So thanks for tuning in for this recording. We're going to talk about the top stories of the year, what was hot, what was not. So I thought I'd start with our managing editor, Joab Jackson, to give us the highlights of the year, some of the top posts. I know we've been collecting the top stories and what they've been looking like. So what do you got?
All right. We had a lot of things popping off in 2020. Of course, the year was interrupted through COVID, and so everybody took a hard left turn in March or so. But a lot of things came out of that. A lot of things were kind of bubbling around before that. But there's a wide range of topics. I'll just throw them out there en masse. We had a big discussion earlier this year about when to use microservices and when to use monoliths. Microservices aren't always the appropriate choice depending on the application needs. A lot of discussion around there. Vulnerability management needs a patch. The current system of rating vulnerabilities and getting the patches out to the software might need an overhaul. So there's something there. We've seen a lot of movement with Rust potentially overtaking C as a more safe, low-level programming language. A lot of things happening with the Linux kernel. Leonard Pottering, creator of Systemd, is talking about revamping the home directories to make them more suitable for this day of distributed computing, and also a lot of movement around the extended BPF as a way to bring programming into the kernel. That might change everything from the use of IP tables, which it could replace, to actually providing a lot more efficient monitoring. Solarwinds showed that there are still vulnerabilities in the supply chain that we need to deal with. And then there's other things like WebAssemblies coming along, and it might be crucial for cloud native extensibility. We're seeing a little bit of movement away from Kubernetes and towards control planes, in particular cross-plane in the open application model, to make things easier for developers. We're also seeing a lot more Kubernetes action happening we we can't forget also the movement to make more appropriate IT terminology, getting rid of these loaded terms like whitelist and master slave for something, a little bit more culturally sensitive. So, that's just what I noticed is coming out of the gate, what's happening here. But a lot of things happening this year.
It was such a funny year, wasn't it? And I think it's almost like a cliche at this point to think of it that way. But I go back to March, and I think I made 2 trips to this last year. One with Eddie down to the Silicon Valley for something we did with Palo Alto Networks, and then I made a trip to Dallas and to visit my daughter with and that was it. And then and then everything changed, and we saw so many different forms of virtual events pop up. But the stories just kept coming. The stories just kept on hitting. And Libby, I'm curious from your perspective then, what did we see through the year? What were some of the things that our data analytics has helped us understand better?
Sure. Well, we do a reader survey every year where we ask our readers what topics they're most interested in reading and listening about on the new Stack in the coming year. And we've been tracking that data now for 3 years. And so we have sort of benchmarks for the different topics, and we can kind of see things rising and falling over the years. And so it's interesting to me to see the change over last year. Some of the topics that Joab just brought up in terms of our top stories fall really nicely into what the trends that we're seeing overall on the site. And so if you want to bring up a chart, we have year over year, we've seen an increase in security topics. So what you're seeing here is 2020 over 2019, 2018, and 2017 data. And that blue there on security means that it's increasing in interest, and same with GitOps. So a lot of those configuration management issues that we've seen rising up this year, I think, is being reflected in that topic. And then we also see the decline in CI/CD and a decline in application monitoring and performance as we've seen those issues being addressed more in the market as Kubernetes matures.
If I can just sort of throw out there, one thing that I certainly have noticed to take something that you had said earlier, Alex, is this has been in many ways a truly odd year. I myself, when it's gone from work travel, I've gone from an average of over 100,000 miles a year to zero miles a year. But as now everyone is working from home, I think we clearly can see, though, that just because developers and programmers and system administrators and DevOps people, just because we're working at home doesn't mean that we still haven't been getting a lot of work done, and that we are continuing to advance the state of the art when it comes to cloud native computing, Kubernetes. I mean, if anything, it seems to me that we've actually have been getting more progress being made across the floor, from everything from meshes to taking security more seriously, which we certainly should. And it's just, it's sort of fascinating to me that work from home has not meant that we would suddenly get lazy, which a lot of middle managers, Al Gilbert would say, we would just be spending our time doing nothing. And the reverse, if anything, has been true. We've been pushing forward more so than ever. Does anyone else see that, or is that just my imagination?
100%. I think if we were talking about something, I think tech is working harder than ever, not easier. Earlier today, Tatiana Mack, who's a tech influencer and just this awesome person, tweeted, I think, the best thing I've read so far. She said, "Today is my last day of teaching my HTML/CSS students. My first year of university teaching involved a global pandemic, a war on justice, wildfires, and an election with a face, followed by, I think that was a wonderful way to describe it, because that's been our life and so many people's lives. And a lot of us are just stuck at home and we sometimes forget about the other lives. But since tech's job is to make creative solutions to the now, everything that's happening now and will be happening in the next year is tech. Tech is the only option for solutions. So we even read, Zoom just released an article today, I think. They were saying they were, back in March, actually putting timers on and doing alternate sleep schedules for all staff, because that's how important it felt in March. So I think the first jobs to really feel, still a lot of people lost jobs, but the first jobs to really feel responsibility was tech. So I think we've been probably working harder than ever because we have no work-life balance at all anymore.
Yeah, I think if I could add, Alex mentioned this, where he said the story just kept coming in 2020, and then Stephen, you and Jennifer, you extrapolated on that, and as you mentioned, Stephen, the work, they are getting the work done, and it seems that the actual engineering work and the operations work in the context of DevOps, that has just been going on as usual. And we're seeing a lot of adoption and war stories out there about the adoption of and working together, hence the increased interest in GitOps, for example. And the way I see it a lot of times when I'm speaking with people, especially the developers, they might before have been sitting in a cubicle, maybe just they could walk over and talk to their co-worker. Now they're just doing the same process. They're putting their code on GitOps or on Git, and they're getting the work done. And at the same time, this year, it was interesting to see how these certain tools are being, I guess, honed is the right word, and in particular, service mesh, for example, and how that's the consensus is that it's essential for deploying on cloud native and legacy, actually, as we're addressing that as well. And at the same time, people are adding and honing their tools for that. And as a subset of that, we're having other tools and they're honing those. And it seems that we're not at the point where Kubernetes and cloud native deployments are becoming boring. But at the same time, again, to go back to what I originally said, they're getting the work done. And it's interesting seeing how that's played out.
Well,
we definitely talked a lot this year about Kubernetes being boring.
Yeah, we did.
Can we not use that? Can we not do that? I understand where you guys are coming from, but a lot of people are working on Kubernetes, and it sounds what your guys are trying to say is that it's become production ready. There's no great surprises.
It's the norm.
It's the norm, yeah. But there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, especially on the networking side. In terms of it's still kind of a nightmare to deploy when you really, especially when you want to do stateful workloads. So the work's not done yet.
That's a good point. I mean, Joe, that's an excellent point. And for me, it's semantic for me. I mean, it's never going to become boring, but maybe my definition's atypical. But for me, when I say boring, I'm thinking that the developer, they're going to start doing their work and working on their code or their applications, and the learning curve of Kubernetes, it should eventually not even be a learning curve. I mean, it's just part of the context of what they're developing their application for. So yeah, they talk about it's going to become boring or it should be boring, et cetera. But, I'm thinking, I think that, from my opinion, we shouldn't even be talking about Kubernetes maybe a year from now.
Oh,
Well,
I think we'll be talking about Kubernetes.
I don't see that happening that soon. Kubernetes is it's just too darn hard for most people.
Yeah.
It just really is. Even if you're using something like, say, OpenShift, it doesn't come easily. And there are still fundamental things like, networking, handling stateful identity and authentication. There's security. Oh, brother, security. There's a lot of work still to be done on Kubernetes, and a lot of people who are still getting up to speed on Kubernetes and are going to be getting up to speed for quite some time, because it just fundamentally, it's just not that easy for people to do.
I was looking at your top posts for each of our writers here, Joab included, and I was looking at your top post, Stephen,
Mhm.
and and clearly the SolarWinds story
Right.
is a big one. I think it has, it's upwards of 28. It's in our 96 percentiles. We like to say it has something like 20, 30.
It was a popular story. We
Yeah.
probably shouldn't get into numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's
And it will have a long tail.
yeah, I mean, it'll have a long tail, and then we have other stories too, like your unfixable Kubernetes security hole means potential man-in-the-middle attacks.
Right.
Then there was, these stories are. I guess I'm wondering, is it going to freeze things up a little bit? Is it going to slow development down? But I don't think so. I mean, it seems like there's not going to be any slowdown, but there will be a lot of new startups that'll be funded. I'm sure. That's
Yeah,
I'm sharing kind of what someone else said on Twitter about that.
Thinking about security and that bug. I mean, Kubernetes was never designed with multiple tenancy in mind. It just wasn't. But it's there, and I was really surprised because I heard from a lot of people after that story came out. A lot of them saying, "Yeah, that's right. I mean, why could you leave the key in the lock like that so everyone can do it?" But I also heard from a lot of people saying, "No, we use it all the time. In fact, it's an essential part of our workflow." And okay, well, I can understand. Okay, if you tell me this is true, I believe you. It really is essential for you. But it's, there's a lot of things, actually, thinking of security matters, like we used to always run containers as root. And I know darn well a lot of you out there are still running rooted containers. Bad. Very, very bad. Don't do this. But in both cases, these are not good ideas. Fundamentally, they're not secure, folks. And ask SolarWinds how it works out for them when they did something fundamentally insecure and someone took advantage of it. Okay.
Well, as you point out too, Stephen, that SolarWinds was not using open source.
Right.
And was actually anti-open source.
Yep.
So, and that's an interesting trend, I think, from this year too. I guess we were talking about this earlier, but this has been a banner year for open source, as every year seems to be, but for different reasons. And in this case, there's been a lot of progress in the security realm. Right. And I mean, with the CNCF, now doing training for security for DevSecOps. I think having, I guess, a lot of progress made in that space. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that from the open source angle.
We actually need to do a lot more work there. The Linux Foundation and Harvard just completed a survey, published a survey result. And about 3% of developers, that's 3% of developers are interested in doing security on their own projects. It is at the absolute bottom of their to-do list. And we need to, that's a mindset that we need to change. And really, I've been covering programming for 30 years. It's almost always been at the bottom of everyone's to-do list. We can't afford that attitude, though. But I'm not sure how we can change it. But the foundation made a number of suggestions, some of which is just to make it a lot easier for people to do security. Give developers tools that will allow them to build in security without a lot of extra time, effort, and sweat. If somebody wants a project that if anyone's listening who wants a project building open source tools that enforce security by design, there's somebody out there will give you money to do this. So, we just need to do a whole lot more work there. We're making some progress. To switch over to another topic, we were talking about how Rust might be taking over from C because Rust is inherently more secure than C is. I mean, I've been programming in C badly, mind you, which is why I'm a journalist and not a programmer. But I can read code with the best of them. And there's still a lot of garbage C out there, and I know enough Rust to be able to read Rust now. And you know what? It just is more secure. And I don't know that we're going to see like a Rust Linux kernel anytime soon, but we are now starting to see a whole lot more programs around the kernel, Linux kernel itself, being written in Rust, and a lot of top-level projects now moving to Rust. And I think that would just help people a lot because, again, in this case, Rust is inherently more secure, so you don't have to sweat as much as you do of C with, where does that pointer really go? I don't know. And so on.
Well, I'll be a little provocative here and say to, Jennifer, there's no machismo in security. I mean, where's the machismo in security? I mean, where, it's not exactly, like a brofest kind of a topic, so to speak. But, so, I mean, you've been covering a lot of kind of the problems that we have in this world with just being so, just so dominated by men in this space. I mean, what are some of the kind of the things that come to your mind about what are the real priorities here for the tech world?
Okay, first, I live in a weird bubble that sometimes need to check myself in. So I talked to Tammy Butow one day and I said, it seems like SRE is a really, site reliability engineering is a really female industry. And she was like, no, it's like 2%. And I was like, oh, so at least I'm interviewing the right people, but I'm not getting a grasp sometimes for how male dominated, white dominated. Well, I live in that grasp, so I get that. But it still was really funny when you said that. I think the biggest issues right now, it's still going to be, COVID's still going to be the big issue of 2021, and tech is going to be involved in that because already we saw what happened in Stanford. They neglected to provide, they used an algorithm that neglected to provide vaccines for doctors. So the algorithm didn't work, and there's going to be tech solution to providing, especially in a country as large as the US, to manage those logistics. But I would definitely say my bet for next year is security and environment, besides the logistics of COVID. I'm working on my first environment piece since, I think, March. I realized that my best podcasts this year were on Clean Green Data Centers and Google Rollout. I don't know if that's because people are sick of listening to podcasts because they were pre-pandemic podcasts, or if people really give two craps about the environment. I hope it's the latter. But I do realize that we're all on overload with media. But I realize I've kind of neglected the environment this year as well in my own writing. And I think the world is literally on fire. Everything else has been happening, but the world has literally been on fire this year. So I definitely believe the biggest, most successful company to come out in 2021, and I don't know what it is, and if it comes out, is somebody that helps organizations measure their carbon footprint. It is incredibly difficult. And then automate that. The cloud is still, even when it's dirty AWS, the cloud is still better than someone managing it on their own. And anybody automating, measuring that, even before we can talk about updating anything, just measuring it is the biggest in demand thing right now, I think. And then the other thing is security. And when we're talking about security, Stephen, all I kept thinking about that would be interesting is I think security, it's insane that you can have a full stack team and security not being a part of it. It doesn't even make sense that you should be able to release without security being a part of it. it actually feels even crazier than ethics not being a part of it. But I would like to see ethics lumped in with security. And when people go through sprints and retrospectives, this has to be part of the culture at this point now.
I would also, I mean, this came into my head as you're speaking, the ethics part of security and just ethical hacking. I mean, hacking has had its even in the tech sector, people still have this idea of the bro culture, the hoodies, etc., for hackers and the hacking culture. And in fact, if only maybe, as Stephen mentioned, 3% of developers are even involved in security, etc., we really need to change the mindset and make people aware that ethical hacking exists, and it goes beyond just penetration testing, and it can even be fun. So, we're talking about C++ and the facility of buffer overflows, for example, with x86 processors. That was fun back in the day, and then now look at what's happening, and maybe we can work on just making it changing the perception and making it more inclusive, and showing that hacking has its purpose that goes just beyond security testing, and B, it can actually be fun and definitely ethical.
So Joe, what were some of the stories that just really didn't resonate this year, that did or that are started to fall off in interest? We're talking about kind of topics that are difficult to get people's heads around, but topics that didn't actually fare as well, didn't show as much interest. And I'd be curious Libby's perspective on this too.
That's a hard thing to ask because inherently we didn't notice them because we weren't paying attention to them.
What are there topics that fell off in interest, do you see, compared to 2019?
Let me think about that. None that immediately come to mind. I don't know. What do you think, Libby?
Well, one that comes to mind for me was there was a big focus on CI/CD last year with the creation of the Continuous Delivery Foundation. And we covered that a lot last year. And we just haven't seen as much momentum around that this year. And it's actually showing in our reader survey as well that it's not as high of an interest topic. So that's,
I know serverless has been kind of mad as well. People are kind of interested in it, but not super interested in it. But I guess it depends on who the audience is.
I guess you're right too, Joe, in some respects. I mean, we don't cover blockchain, but I haven't heard much about blockchain outside of our world, really.
Oh, I heard an interesting statistic about blockchain. I think it's from Morgan Stanley that 92% of the projects that have been started in the last 5 years, blockchain projects have been abandoned, like the vast majority of them. And I've always kind of seen it as a multi-level marketing scheme. I'm sorry, Bitcoin.
That's how you really feel.
But there's I mean, what can the blockchain do that a mature distributed database system can't? Is my question.
One technology which I think has finally become boring is containers. I mean, there was a time, one of my most well-hit stories ever was on Docker. When Docker equals container, that was it. And everyone, even though containers actually have a very long history going back to the Sunos and even IBM mainframe days, but everyone bought Docker and containers. That was everything. But now I think everyone pretty much gets what containers are, at least people who take it seriously, though I am constantly surprised by people who still can't wrap their minds around it. But I think containers certainly have finally become boring. And as for blockchains, I don't know if I'd call it a multi-level marketing scheme, but I have to say I've known a lot of blockchain projects a few years ago, and people were really excited and going places with it. except they never got to any of the places they were going to, and I just haven't seen it. And maybe there's someone will actually, though, as I think, even as I said that, I think, well, containers were around forever, and then it was only 5-6 years ago that they finally took off. Maybe there is a solution, a product, a service that will popularize blockchain and will finally live up to its promise. But if there is such a thing, we haven't seen it yet.
I got an under-discussed topic this year, multi-cloud. Multi-cloud, we thought last year would be the next big thing, but it doesn't really seem like people are that interested in it. Or if they do talk about it, it's kind of hypothetical.
Well, it gets back to, some of the more interesting topics is like identity, and the management of not just people, but lots and lots of things, and try to do that on multiple cloud services. And I think that it's going to kind of change the definition of how we think about cloud services too, because if an edge device is as much as a way to kind of manage it, manage a network, and if you can have compute and storage on that edge device, then you're starting to look at kind of a whole different kind of thinking on what cloud services are. I mean, I'm personally interested in the hardware story, and I'm doing some work with Intel, and it's certainly piquing my interest around how we think about these programmable, like FPGAs, and how you think about FPGAs, and how you think about service mesh and the intersection with with network monitoring, and so the networking layer and the programmable layer are definitely kind of intersecting here. And it changes our for me at least, changes our perceptions about about a lot of what we're looking at. I mean, another thing is just the interest in storage. It's not necessarily storage anymore, but it's about the data store itself. And if you look at a database like like Vitesse, I just actually tweeted about earlier today how much it's grown in contributions and in the number of companies who have adopted it. And it's a giant data store, right? Essentially.
That's something we learned this year, right, Alex? Is that our readers say they're not interested in storage, and it's not a sexy topic for them. But then when we look at the numbers, what people are actually reading, they want to read about storage and specifically about application state and how to manage state in distributed systems.
Yeah, nobody wants to think about storage. I mean, just like, you want to back up your personal files, you have to go out and buy an SSD from Best Buy, or you get a cloud plan with Google, but you don't necessarily want to expend any effort thinking about it more than you have to. But it's still a problem.
I think definitely a topic that links a lot of these things together is what James Governor kind of successfully dubbed, it's always good to have successful naming, of progressive delivery. And I think that comes down to this idea, if people watching don't know the idea of progressive delivery, it's anything from chaos engineering observability to service mesh to A/B release cycles, anything where you're controlling the radius of your release. So I think that's had a good year. And what I was thinking when we were talking about the CI/CD hasn't been a trending topic, it's either because you're doing it, or as Weaveworks Cornelia Davis said at KubeCon, there shouldn't be CI/CD. There should be continuous integration that's proven, that's gone on for a while. And then there should be continuous delivery. These can't be together, and it all comes back to security automation. Security, you can't possibly automate the two. And I think progressive delivery and the whole theme is it in production or not? That seems to be the theme of this year, because we all say, like, Charity Majors, where's her cool test in prod t-shirt? It's great, but not everyone can do it. Who can do that? Who can't? So everything is coming down to what can you have in production? What can you not? And that comes back to, Stephen, your entire topic of security. So maybe this 3% kills me, this whole idea that 3% of developers don't want to do their security. But if they're doing progressive delivery right, if they're doing GitOps right, which GitOps is kind of an alternative to CI/CD, are they doing security and they just don't know it?
Anyone else on progressive delivery or any other topic that you'd like to see that you didn't that almost was an underdog in many ways? That showed it started to show its mettle as the year went on. Was there anything?
Black Lives Matter, do they? I'm sorry. Like, I got real excited that y'all wanted to invest in that topic, that New Stack had a commitment to an editorial angle that Black Lives Matter. I don't know how it went because I don't have the statistics editorially, but it felt very performative at times of other organizations. Did anybody really do anything that helps support Black Lives Matter in tech? I'm not sure.
Not enough.
Certainly not enough. Yeah.
I would argue.
I think, and this is really more of a gut feeling than anything I have any numbers on, but I think the switch to a virtual work world has helped that some. That is Black Lives Matters or just gay or women or whatever, because we now are living in a virtual world where I'm in Asheville, North Carolina. Some of you are in Oregon, one of you is in France. And yes, we are all waspish in look and so on. But I've been in other meetings where people who might otherwise not have had a voice have had a voice because they feel more comfortable. It seems to me, again, this is just my perception, that they feel more comfortable getting their voice out there when it's in a remote situation where they don't have to deal with a bro culture. It's not quite so much in their face as it is in other when they're at the office.
I'm gonna politely disagree.
Sure, go.
Yes, there are certain circumstances, and I think the open source community in general is more welcoming. And KubeCon's a good example. You have a lot of speakers from Africa for the first time, and they're not increasing their carbon footprint by participating, and it's great. But Zoom has also, there's been a lot of writing and a lot of proof that Zoom is Zoom is our de facto video conferencing, is quite a hostile place for people. You're inviting people into their homes, so it makes you more vulnerable. Virtual backgrounds behead Black people in Zoom, or at least they did till hopefully they fix that. There's a lot of vulnerability that comes. Sexual harassment still happening. Women in tech, sorry, I was about to say girls in tech, women in tech are not getting groped at conferences, as we didn't talk about, but the one last year, I knew 4 individuals that are female that all got groped at a conference. Like, I personally know.
And this was after,
this is happening. So now women are getting asked out in their DMs. They're getting, I'm sorry, I don't know how to say this more nicely, dick pics in their DMs. So they have a broader audience. Maybe percentage, it's more welcoming. I do see more representation on stage. I'm hoping it's not just performative for 2020. But I don't think it's there yet. I love, in theory, it should be. And it is more inclusive in a way at home. But then if we're talking about inclusiveness of differently abled people, are companies really caring? I think everything was, yay, in March, April. Let's be supportive, psychological safety, work-life balance. Now it's boom, boom, boom. It's just everyone has to work harder. There are layoffs. Statistically, women and people of color are the first to get cut for, I'm sure, biases and others. And we can't forget, we have a pandemic going on. They're the ones getting most hit. And people of color are most likely to have people living with them and taking care of people.
Right.
Well, good.
There's so much stratification that's been historically baked in, I guess, to the whole IT employment that we haven't even begun to address that. It's good that we're recognizing individuals and moving them up, but at the same time, I got a lot of friends in the restaurant industry in New York that are having difficulty finding jobs. And they're like, well, why don't I get into coding? And it's difficult to point the path forward. It's difficult, to provide the tools to, even get people on that level where they can just start moving forward. It's just, there's just a lot of work that still needs to be done by society as a whole.
Well, I think we can say that 2021 will be a year where we may possibly get together again if the vaccine is effective in any way, but it's not going to be until later in the year. But I think the new Stack could do better in its coverage of the BIPOC world and how they're in the context with our focus on explanation analysis of at scale development, deployment, and management. So Jennifer, keep pushing us, and anyone out there who's watching this or listening, please press us. It's important for us to be accountable. So that's something that I'd like to end on with. But I just would like to say to thank all the people who have come to the New Stack to read our stories and to provide and to listen to our shows. It's quite meaningful.
And take our surveys.
And and to help us be on top of these topics. And I just want to thank each and every one of you here and all the great work that you do. Stephen, you've been relatively new to our group, and I just can't tell you how nice it is to have you work with us. Your expertise and perspectives and context and writing are so good. Jennifer, your perspectives are right on. So thank you so much for your podcast and everything else. And Bruce, you're Bruce, I miss you at Circus. I got to tell you that much. In Vegas and all our different kind of places where we met. Bruce is a real champ. Thank you so much. And Joab, straight out of Brooklyn, Joab is and West Virginia, and has done just such a fantastic job in managing the New Stack. And Libby, and it helps us keep it all together, and it's been a real force for us over the years, and just has done such great work. And Eddie is behind the mic, and I don't know if Eddie can make a kind of a cameo here, but thanks to Eddie. If anyone would why don't we just go around with just the last word about the year and what looks ahead, and just so we can end on your notes. Stephen, why don't we start with you?
Sure. 2021. I really hate to tell you this, but vaccine or not, we're not out of the woods yet by any means. Earlier, I said I'd gone, my normal year of business travel was over 100,000 miles, and this year I was at 0. I think it'll be greater than 0, but I honestly don't expect that I'll be going to technology conferences or that they'll even be being held at least until the fall. Which means we really need to, if you're still working at home and you need to, whatever your situation is, you need to buy equipment, you need to get more space, whatever, go ahead and do it, because you're going to be working from home for quite a while still to come. And on the other hand, though, if that gets to be a bit much for you, consider all those poor folks out there who are in retail or restaurant work, and they don't have the option. In a way, we're very blessed to be able to do work that is both meaningful and that we can do from home. So hang in there, folks.
I'm going to jump in and say completely agree. I'm very #stay the home. I think it's just, first of all, one of my clients checked in with everybody last month and said, what do you need? We're checking in again. What do you need now to make your at-home office comfortable? I think that's a really good way to start 2021. Let's just get rid of that. And yeah, I think 2021, we can't forget Black Lives Matter. We can't forget the people most effed by this industry. I mean, not by this, actually by this industry too. I was going to say pandemic, but both. We have to dedicate our lives to that. And that is all cyclical. To coming back to the environment is so important. It's going to be an important topic. Just staying home, that is still a brave thing. It's more boring. It was cool in April when we were all making bread. Just stay home. Keep doing what we're doing. Like I said, tech is about making creative solutions to the problems now. Keep going for it, because I think it's good. And I just want to say, this is the longest job I've had working with the New Stack. So that says something about y'all, and it's just really fun to be technical and to cover such important topics and the culture side of tech. So thank you.
All right, Bruce. Bruce is frozen up, so we'll go to.
I was going to say that I'm the geek, and I think we're going to. I mean, as you said, Stephen, we're in a very sober moment of history, but at the same time, we're going to have, by force or whatever, we're going to focus on the work, and ultimately, a lot of this development work is fascinating, and operations work, and the shift to the cloud, and I think we're going to continue to see some interesting things this year, technology-wise, and we might have some surprises. But at the worst case, I mean, at the very least, we're going to see some more, how things are going to play out more, and in terms of DevOps, and keeping it all together and seeing how these massive deployments continue to take place. And we'll, this time next year, we'll say, that really worked, and that didn't. I don't know. That's my philosophy. Just focus on the work, opposed to what's going on elsewhere.
Libby.
Well, I just want to say that I'm extremely hopeful for 2021. I don't want to jinx it, knock on the table, but I think, like all of you pointed out, it's been a really, really difficult year, but we've all hung in there, and really made a lot of progress in a lot of ways, culturally and technologically. And so I'm looking forward to 2021 and what it will bring.
Joab, take it out.
Yeah. I mean, I think 2021 is the year that Kubernetes is going to have to come to terms with the enterprise. I think a lot of organizations have shoveled as many apps as they can in containers, but they're not really, developing. They're grappling with the stateful apps, and I think the Kubernetes community is going to have to start figuring out what sort of enterprise features, like live migration, for instance, that can be done within Kubernetes, and versus what that can be done external to Kubernetes. So it'll be a great reckoning coming up this year.
Well, thank you, everyone. And once again, thanks everyone to who's watching this and who's listening to the podcast. We couldn't be here without you. So have a great year, have a great holiday, and we'll talk again soon.